Hello, everyone. My name is Samia Ashraf. I'm a Flutter GDE and a Women Tech Makers ambassador. And today I will be talking about a very interesting topic in Flutter, which is called design patterns, design systems in Flutter. So let me quickly walk you through today's agenda before we start with the topic. So first we'll start with what is OOP, because to understand what is design patterns, we need to know what is OOP. So a quick look at OOP, and then we will go for design patterns, followed by design systems, and we will also look at some of the benefits of design system, and finally we will see some of the takeaways from this session. So what is OOP? Now, I told you that to understand what is design patterns, you need to know what is OOP. And that is because design patterns talk about how you can solve some of the object oriented issues in your code. And OOP is nothing but object oriented programming, which means that object oriented programming that is based on the concept of objects which can contain data and code. So in simple words, whenever you write a Flutter program, or whenever you write code in your Flutter project, you might come across some objects and classes, especially if you're working uh, with data coming from the API and transferring or sending it to the UI layer. So all of this is done with objects, right? So OOP is all about the concept of objects and what the data that it contains, which means the objects contain the data in the form of code. So that is what OOP means. And the main goal is to reduce the programming complexity and to do several tasks simultaneously. So the way you write objects, the way you define objects, talks a lot about the project, because the main goal is always to make your code efficient by using the objects in the most correct way. So that is what OOP means. It's object oriented programming. Now coming to the design patterns are nothing but series of patterns that provides a template or description of how you can solve a common problem. And this problem is nothing but the object oriented problem. Now, when we talk about a Flutter project and when you talk about sending data from one layer to the other layer, that is from the repository layer all the way back to the UI layer, there is a series of things that happens, right? And this code that you write, when you extract the values, you store it in the objects, and then you pass it to the UI layer. So this code has to be very much efficient, and that is going to decide how efficient your entire code is. And that is why design patterns was introduced, so that it solves some of the common problems of object oriented code. Now object is nothing but something that an entity that is going to consist of data, and that can be used with the methods later on. So let's say you're calling multiple APIs in your project, and you need to organize the code in such a way that you're going to make the code more efficient by using as less resources as possible, but also obtaining the efficient result. So that is why design patterns was introduced, just so that you can solve some of the complexities that arise when you use objects, because objects is very vast. When you use it in especially larger projects, it can become very messy if you don't know how to handle them properly. And design patterns offer solutions on how you can manage your code in a better and more manageable way. So Now, design patterns is not something I would expect a beginner to know because this comes as you progress with coding. So this is not. It's always best if you follow it from the beginning. But if you have never heard of design patterns, then I highly recommend you check it out on how you can properly use it because that is what is going to make you a better programmer when you handle your resources properly. And design patterns talk about the code structure. They are basically going to it's a set of rules, a set of guidelines that is going to comment on how you can on how you can make your code structure more efficient. And it solves a particular object oriented design problem or an issue in your code. And also it speeds up the development process because it's efficient. It's actually telling you to reduce the duplicating of methods or duplicating of objects. So in that way you're going to reuse some of the components, right? So that is going to speed up the development process, and in the end you will end up writing more flexible and readable code. So that's what design patterns is all about. Now we're going to look at design systems. Now, design pattern was more at the object oriented level. Design systems are mainly at the UI layer level, I can say. This design system is again important to make your code more efficient and to reduce the duplicating of the code snippets. So, again, design patterns was at the object oriented level. Design systems is more at the code structure level. So this has nothing to do with the objects. And you should be knowing design system guidelines efficiently. And this is much more simpler than the design pattern. So once you perfect the design systems and you know how to efficiently code with design systems, then you can jump to the design patterns. So, design system by definition is a set of standard. It's like a set of rules or set of guidelines which is used to manage the design at scale by reducing redundancy while creating a shared language and visual consistency across different pages and channels. So, design system is a set of standards, like I said, a set of rules that is designed by both the designer and the developer, or sometimes it's just the designer to manage design at scale. That means to manage the entire app's design in one rule set by reducing the redundancy while creating a shared language. Now, this shared language, if you see here, there is an image which talks about what is the font type. It can be anything poppins, colors, and some buttons. So, this is a set of rules that was created by a designer that talks about what font type should be used in the project, what are the primary, secondary colors, or all the colors of the app going to look like, and also some of the buttons that should be used throughout the app. Now, this color would come with a hex value so that it becomes easier for the developer to pick the hex value and just use it in the code. Now, this you can call it as a shared language that is understood both by the developer and the designer, and visual consistency across different pages and channels. Now, the advantage of having this document is that the communication becomes much more easier because almost everything is visual here. And if the designer wants to change something, all they have to do is here, and the developer can just note it down rather than just informing it verbally, and maybe the developer is going to forget. So that can be reduced when you have a formal document which decides what are the design elements that need to be followed. So this is extremely handy when you're working on bigger projects and even smaller projects. The miscommunication is going to be reduced and also the confusions. So once the both designer and the developer are satisfied with what the design rule set is going to look like, let us now look at how does the design system benefit a developer now, and how can the developer make the most out of the design system. Now this is very important because the tips that I'm going to share now, that is how it can benefit a developer, is actually going to benefit you once you start using these. Now design system, you can think of it as a bootstrap but for Flutter, and this bootstrap will be designed by you. So it's, and it can be different for different projects as per the requirements. So think of it as a bootstrap designed by you for your Flutter project, where you write what are the buttons going to look like, what are the colors of the buttons, and pretty much everything. And if you see here in the image, I have defined a color which says color black equal to colors dot black. And then I'm going to use that black color in one of the text styles, which is called F10 black. So when I just read F10 black, you should get a hint of what it is. It is a font of size 10, and that font is going to be of color black. So text style, font size 10, font family, it can be anything, again, as per your project. And the color is going to be black. So this is a text style which I can use in multiple places in my project. And all I have to do is declare all of these in one file. And that file can be a main styles file for your folder, for your project. You can place it inside the lib and call it as styles.dart or widgets.dart, or it can be anything. And that file is going to consist of all of these data constants. The colors, it can consist of colors, text styles, image strings, input decoration, box decoration, anything which is going to be used in multiple places in the project can be placed inside that file. So it prevents the developer from creating 10 different button types in a project. So if your button is using a box decoration, which is going to be same for all of the 10 buttons, then you don't have to define the box decoration in 10 different places. Just define it here like this, and then just use that constant value here. Just use that the variable name here. So you can, that way you can reduce the number of lines of code. And also if you want to change something, that is if I wanted to change the color of this, I'm just going to change it here, and it is going to be applied in all the places where I've used F10 black. So you don't have to manually go to 10 different places and change the color. Just change it once and the change will be applied to all the places. So that way it's going to save you a lot more time, and especially if it's a massive project, then it's going to save really tons of time, not just for this, but for image strings, for anything, any of the constant values that you use. And using this, the one more benefit is that you're going to be in sync with other developers, because this file is going to consist of all of the data values, right? So if you change something here, it's like I said, it's going to be applied to all the other places that use F10 black. So if you are not using this file and you're manually going and changing at the 10 places, you might forget to change it at one of the places, because if you have it using in 100 different places, the chances of missing to change in one place is definitely quite high, and that could create a miscommunication between the developers, which can be resolved if you use it in this way, where you store all of the constant values in one file. and better communication between the developers and the designers. Again, because of this shared document, which both the developers and the designers can agree upon. And so, also, one more advantage of this is that you're going to avoid repeating the code. Like I said, the the same example, F10 black. You don't have to write all of this code in 10 different places. So you're going to save a lot of effort in avoiding to repeat the code and reusing components for other projects, thus saving time and effort. So I personally do this. For all of my projects, I have a widgets.dart file, and I just copy and paste this to any new project that I start. And all I have to do is, if the font family is changing, just change the name of the font family. And that way, I don't have to sit and write everything from scratch again. Just copy and paste it to other projects that I want. And of course, if you want to add any new elements there, I will definitely add that. If I want to remove something, I will do that. But most of the part is going to remain the same. The color black, the black color is never going to change, so I don't have to do anything here. F10 black is pretty much going to be the same every time. So this way you can reuse the components for other projects, thus saving time and effort. And this is also a way to make your code more efficient by avoiding the repeating of code. And also, one important thing that we need to note is that when we do it this way, it is very easy to complicate the design system. And that is because we have to understand that everything here is like a flow model. It depends, the F10 black depends on this black color. So if I change something here, if I change the black here, let's say I want to add more opacity to this, but in my text style, I don't want any opacity. So that is one thing you need to keep in mind. You need to take another variable, call it as black with opacity, and then add the opacity to that color. So you have to understand that when one of the variable is depending on the other variable, then in order to make something new, you need to define a new variable. Otherwise, it's going to affect all the variables which is depending on it. So that's one thing we need to remember. And the widgets.dart, you can store pretty much everything in this. The color constants, the image strings. Now, image strings is another example for this, because let's say there is a logo image and you're using this logo in maybe 5 places in the project. So instead of having to define the entire string once, I can just come and save it in widgets.dart, call it as logo string, and just write the string there and use the logo string variable wherever I want to use the logo. Not just for the logos, this applies to all the image strings, have them in the widgets.dart, and also box decoration. Box decoration is again a very important one, because this can add up to a number of lines of code. Because it comes with a little bit of boilerplate. So whenever, let's say a button, you are defining a button, and you want it, let's say there is a box decoration in it, so that button is going to be used in 10 different places, right? So just define the box decoration in widgets.dart and just use that decoration in the buttons. So next one is sized box. I'm going to show an example for this in the coming slides. Sized box is again a constant to add empty height to the project. So let's say you have a column with many elements and two elements have space between them. So one of the ways to add that space is using a sized box. That can be a sized box of height 35, size box of height 25. So notice that 25 and 35, these are all numbers. So again, these you can store it in widgets.dart. And then we have textiles, the one that we just previously discussed, F10 black. Like that, you will be having a lot many textiles. So always a good practice to note them down in widgets.dart. And you can do so much more with widgets.dart. You can also have input decoration. You can have your snack bar there, and your app bar. So many things you can store it in widgets.dart and then use it in multiple places. And one more thing would be not to have 2 3 files with all of these constant values, because that can become tricky if you don't know how to group them or how to place them in the folder structure. Always a good idea to have one widgets.dart file for every project. So this is going to reduce the complexities when you're working with in a bigger team. So now, how again, one more benefit of how the design system can benefit a developer is I'm going to I'm having a box decoration constant here, which is table decoration, and this uses some of the values, which is gray color, and it has a border and also some box shadow with a border radius of 5, and I'm going to call it as a table decoration. Now whenever I'm using a container where I want this particular decoration, then I'm going to say box decoration and table decoration. So this is how you can reduce the number of lines of code, because this was taking up a lot of code. I have actually removed the code for box shadow, because when you write this in many places, it's going to just simply add up to the lines. So that is the reason you can store it in widgets.dart and call it as a constant, and then use that value in your wherever you want to use it. And one more thing is that here we have colors.gray of 100, colors.gray of 350. So even these you can make it as a constant value and use them here. But again, uh, but always remember that when you have colors.gray of 100 in one variable, do not change that variable if you don't want the change to be affected here. So always have dedicated values for them. And also the box shadow here. If you're using the same box shadow in multiple places, just have a box shadow constant, and you can use them here. So this way you can um, go on grouping. But always remember that when you have multi-level grouping, it is very easy to complicate things. So keep it, just understand the complexity of the project, and according to that you can do the grouping. So this table decoration was really required because I was using it in many places, so that's why I have come up with this constant. Now the sized box that I was talking about, which you can the size box which you can place it in your widgets.dart, this size box constant. So how you can do that is, this is my widgets.dart file, and here I'm going to use a sized box with width 0, and this constant I'm going to call it as width 0, so that when I read it, not just me, if any other developer reads it, he or she will know that it's a width with 0 width. And when they see width 3, they will know it's a width with 3. 3 width, and then width 5. So that way, naming is extremely important, because you are not the only person who is working in the project. There will be many more people collaborating. So it's important that they also understand what you are doing there, rather than them spending time in just understanding what is happening. So always the naming convention is extremely important, and always best to use the values when you write the name. So example F10 black, So font size of 10 with the color black. And if it is bold, I'm going to call it as F10 black bold or F10 black W700, W600. That way, naming is again very important. And you just have to keep it simple. That's all. So, a simple technique to show an invisible widget. Now here what I'm doing is I have a sized box and I want to show you how to use this sized box, especially the width 0 sized box. Now, there is a Boolean variable called show icon. And when show icon is true, I'm going to show this particular icon. And when it is false, I'm not going to show anything there. It's going to be an empty space with no width and no height. No height. So what I'm going to do is the Boolean variable show icon, I'm going to put it in a ternary operator and I'm going to say when show icon is true, show this particular icon, and when the show icon is false, show width 0. So in that space, nothing is going to be shown. Absolutely nothing. So this way you can do it for sized box with height as well. And it can be as many size boxes as you wish, 5, 10, 15, as many as you wish. And widgets must be as simple as possible. And also the constant names must be as simple as possible. So here, widgets must be as simple as possible. Just like how I have the sized box widget with the width 0. So you don't have to complicate it. If you have a much simpler way of doing it, then that's even better. So, how does design system benefit a developer? One more, we're going to look at another benefit here. So, I have a common button. Now, this is a common widget, a button inside the app, login, register, submit. Now, you're going to notice that they all look alike, but they have different colors and different text, right? So, we're going to look at how we can do this. We have a common button and I have the body of this button here. So the only thing that varies is the text, the color, and the on press. And I'm using an elevated button with a style. The style is very simple. Color is going to come from the button that I'm going to call. And the text is again going to be a variable one. For first button, it's going to be login, second button register, and third button submit. On press, again, every time login is pressed, it's going to be a different functionality, register different, and submit different. Color is different, on pressed is different, and the text is different as well. This way, I'm not writing this entire code thrice in my program. I'm only writing this code once and calling this 3 times. So this way, again, my code becomes much more efficient. And if I want to change something, let's say I want to change the style here, F12 white, I don't have to go and change it in 3 places. I only have to change it in one because I'm not using F12 white here. That's why. So this way you can make your code more efficient. And some of the takeaways are clean code, reducing the repeating of the code, which is the main goal of design patterns and design systems, and swift communication between design and dev teams, because there is a document that comes with all of the rules that needs to be followed by both dev and the design teams, and easier onboarding for future developers. All they have to do is for the constant study the widgets.dart file, and they'll get an idea of all the constants that you're using in your project. And also the document designed by the designers that talks about font, colors, buttons will also help the future developers as they'll get an idea of how to take the project forward. And when it comes to design patterns, it's again always best because the future developers will get a good grasp of it. So that's all for today. I hope you've learned something about design patterns and design systems. You can ask questions if you have any. Any questions regarding the design patterns or design systems? So, Mohammed asks, are there books about design patterns in Flutter? So, design patterns in Flutter, I would say there are more articles that talk about the design patterns, and design patterns is a huge topic actually. So, you can definitely check out some of the articles. The one that I know is by Mangeet Das. It's available in his website and Medium as well. So definitely check that out. And especially if you check the website in which he talks about design patterns, that is broken down into series. And that series is pretty much going to cover everything about design patterns. So definitely um, check that out. And as of books, I don't think I have seen any, but yeah, definitely check out the Mangir Das article. I hope that answered your question. So Ahmed Sami asks, is using Flutter hooks good? Yes, it depends on the use case. So I use Flutter hooks a lot. I just like to avoid the stateful widgets. So that is the reason I use Flutter hooks. But there are some instances where you cannot avoid but use state. So that is when I go for the stateful widgets. But yeah, if I have to choose for a simple widget between stateful and hook widgets, I will definitely go with Flutter hooks. And I've also written an article. It's available in my on my Medium. You can definitely check out how to use the Flutter hooks there. So okay, just a second. So I'll share the link to my Flutter hooks article. And I will also share the link to Mangir Das website where he talks about design patterns. So that is the next link will be for Mangita's website, where he talks in series about the design patterns. Any more questions? So I'm going to try and do another session on detailed design patterns. But this session, I kept it focused on design system because design system is much easier to understand. So once we complete this, we can then go for the design patterns. So hopefully next time. Thank you. Any more questions? A certificate. So Mohammed asks if there is a certificate of Flutter development. You can take up some courses. So some of the paid courses is going to give you a Flutter development certificate. But I would say uh, if you're looking for a certificate, then yes, go for the paid courses and get the certificate. But otherwise, just learn through the examples. Most of the examples you will find it in YouTube. Explore more on how you can call the APIs using your in your Flutter project. So just practice until you perfect. But yeah, for certification, go with the paid online courses. So they will give you a certificate. There's one by London App Brewery where the author is Angela Yu. So her course will give you a certificate. And I think most Udemy courses also provide with a certificate. Any any other questions? Yeah, no problem. So thank you everyone for joining in. And if you have any questions, any other questions after this session, you can definitely reach out. My socials are there on the screen, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So yeah, thank you for joining.